you want to give advice for a bigger audience, where do they get their income from advertisement? Or how do you say, like, if you have good content, they can, be sustainable?
Good question. I'm completely professional deformed, so if I'm doing these kind of things, I thought it already 100 times. So, when you have what you do when you want to get advertisements, you go with quantifiable results to a company. You say you have a company, for instance, a mobile phone company, and you want to sell credit. So the mobile phone company sells most credit to people between 16 and 24. So you got a radio station, and you think, I want to get advertisements from them. So you think, we got a program which is very popular. A lot of people between 16 and 24 listen to it. We did listeners research. So 80% of the people between 16 and 24 in this area listen daily to this program. So if you sponsor this, then you can improve your brand by combining it with our program, and thus sell more credit. You get what I mean? Does it make sense? So, and if you do that, so if you have managed to quantify what you're doing, you're making a business model, and you can also work on your programming. So what am I doing for whom, for what? Because a thing many journalists have, and that's international, journalists are upward accountable. They always want to know how the powerful people, the rich people, the famous people are doing, but themselves, they're not accountable at all. They never listen to their listeners. They think they should tell what they should listen to. No. But what we're trying to bring in is that people should try to go to their listeners and see what's relevant for them, what is added news value for them. And then you're creating something which has really value for them, and you can build your media outlet on that.
Would you then create something there that we don't even have in Europe?
Well, good question. And that's going to be one of my conclusions later on. Is that the problems between North and South, the classical difference between the developing countries and the big bad West, are getting smaller and smaller. And we have to invent new business models. But I think that there are quite a lot of radio stations. The whole thinking in audience groups is very strong here in the West. So we cannot say everyone has a profile and programs are made up for nothing and there's audience research done. And that's a lot of the case, very often not the case in those countries. So we're trying to make those businesses more viable, but I completely agree with you that relevance is not always the most important thing here in media as well. Making money is often far more important. And there you see that helping people to get viable business models can work on a good way, but it can also not necessarily improve freedom of speech and access to reliable and relevant information. So what is our weapon against all this bad money and corruption and whatever? That is professional ethics. And actually, so we're using journalism. We're saying journalism is quite a classic profession. So if you're using some basic rules, like in every story you have to have the 5 W's and the H, who, what, where, why, when, how. You have one side of the story is no story, so you make sure you have all the sides, and you have balanced reporting, then you got a pretty good story. But this is, in my perception, or it refers to a kind of an objective truth, right? So a kind of a modernist idea that we can capture reality if we use these instruments. Well, then there is this school of thought that says, no, it's not objective reality, but by doing balanced reporting and ensuring that everyone has a say, we're creating a kind of intersubjective truth. So maybe we cannot approach reality in itself, in the Kantian sense, the thing by itself, but we're creating something that we all share, or at least the important factors. We get different perspectives on the thing. But then when you are trying to think that further, and with the whole postmodernism thing, everything is text, that civil journalism and journalism in general is also creating narratives and truths by itself. And unfortunately, a lot less about this is written in journalism studies than in literary sciences, where fiction and reality much more intertwined. But it's an interesting thing, and especially with the whole, when you look at information spread on social media, a lot of it, like 67% of the news links refer back to traditional media. So how big and important the social media are, a lot, they refer back to traditional media. And then on the other hand, information that doesn't come from these traditional media is often wrong. But information that's often wrong also gets a lot corrected via social media. So somehow these new generations got a really big BS detector and trying to see what's wrong and becoming more media literate in that sense, becoming more critical of the media, but also producing more news and information. And that's an interesting thing. We'll get more about that. Then we get, we're still talking about what is media development, right? So you got two kinds of media development. You have media development and development of media. These two are very conflicting terms, although it might not seem that. So we have so we have M4D and D of M. So with media for development, you're using, for instance, media to battle HIV/AIDS in a country by sending out messages, by doing soap operas, by getting information out. By development of media, you're educating people to make those choices for themselves. And unfortunately, these two are more and more intertwined, because if we go back to the political frame, is that you want people to think or do a certain thing. And I got a pretty good example, or vivid example of this, is that when the UN or NATO went to Afghanistan, but you can say Afghanistan, you can also say Somalia. What you do is you get a mandate from the Security Council, and after a short while, a government is established, and then the government invites the international force and the international community to intervene in that country. And from that moment on, you're in a kind of a strangle tango, because if you are dependent on doing your work there on that government, then you might as hell be careful about organizing opposition against that government. So whereas you're trying to build a system which is democratic, which is mostly, as Karzai's government in Afghanistan is completely top-down, and has very little to do with democracy, very centralized, and actually complete, but it suffices in getting in the idea of getting a country stable. So if you're into long-term democracy support, then sometimes you should not look to short-term goals, but unfortunately that's very often the political reality. As we've seen, for instance, in the last year in the crisis in Somalia, piracy, but also the famine. This has been something that has been expected for a very long time, but only when it's actually already too late. We go in there with a humanitarian intervention, try to save lives, which is very laudable, very good, but it doesn't really work on the underlying problems and structures. And